Welcome to the Fun Ideas Podcast. I've hijacked this podcast, and I am now the host. My guest is Mark Arnold, who is the usual host of this podcast, but not today.
No.
Now, for this thing, I'm going to, if you want to look at Mark's career from his early days, also look at Mort Todd's, his interview with Mort Todd. It's specifically called Mort Todd Returns. Which now this is going to be something totally different. I'm going to talk about people Mark met. I'm going to talk about other projects that Mark went. I dug deep through Mark's blog, Mark's old resumes.
Oh, crap.
Mark's jobs, why Mark lives in Oregon, and of course his books. Now, first, we are going to talk about a little bit about your early career. What is now I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about your childhood that Mort did not ask. First of all, what is the first movie you saw?
The first what I saw?
Movie you saw.
Ever in my life?
Yeah.
In a theater or on TV?
Either one.
Oh. I think in a movie theater, it was The Love Bug, which was the first of the Disney Herbie movies. And that originally came out in '69, and it was sometime around then. I was about 3 years old. That's what I believe is the first movie I saw in the movie theater. As far as TV goes, it could be The Wizard of Oz in like 1971. Could be The Ten Commandments, which I didn't finish that time. But I didn't watch a lot of movies at that young age, so I really it could have been something on the Disney show too. I don't know.
You were just hooked on the box.
What?
Sure, you were just hooked on the TV.
Yeah. So
because with me it was I never got interested in old movies until much later.
Yeah.
Because now were you also hooked on comic books from the very beginning too?
Pretty much, yeah, because they were around. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't know how to get them. There was just like a stack of like 10 or 15 random comic book issues from random publishers. So there was like an issue of Casper, an issue of Wendy, an issue of Mighty Thor, an issue of Three Stooges, Yogi Bear. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. Underdog was one, Scooby-Doo was one. Just random stuff that came out in the late 60s, early 70s. And my sister's a few years older, so maybe they were gifts to her, but I somehow acquired them because she kind of grew out of them. I never did.
Now, were you interested in superheroes when you were younger as well?
Yeah, not as much as maybe other people, but I liked them. My take on superheroes has always been this. I mean, I've been Mr. Anti-superhero just to be a butthead, but the reality is I like them, but I tend to like the more comical stuff. Like I will say that I like Adam West Batman versus any of the theatrical ones or anything like that, because it's comical, it's humorous. I think
Right.
superheroes is a little too serious, but I've seen a lot of the recent Marvel movies and DC movies and stuff, but I don't aggressively go see them.
I've actually been in the middle between that.
Yeah.
Where I'm interested in like, when it comes to TV, I like the Batman the animated series and like the Superman Fleischer shorts, but the gritty Dark Knight stuff just never was appealing. I've been kind of in the middle between which it can have funny moments, but it's usually kind of dark.
Yeah. I like Batman, the Batman Adventures and those Fleischer cartoons. I like Superman Adventures that they made later on too. But when it got to like Batman Beyond and stuff like that, I was just like, But that's usually what happens is these characters start out pretty good and then they get progressively darker and grittier, and I get less and less interested because I feel like one of my favorite of the current like superhero movies, which is a few years old now, was Thor Ragnarok. And it's, a lot of people don't like it because it's so silly, but that's precisely why I do like it.
Right.
And
there are a couple things I can think of that are almost too stupid, like the Captain Marvel serials that they did.
Well, way back in the 40s. Well,
those
serials are pretty silly. Yeah.
What? Those are actually probably too stupid.
Yeah. I think the best of those are probably the Kirk Allen Superman ones. And even those,
Um, now, now, when you were growing up, were you, because I know you mentioned that you were a Jay Ward fan.
Yeah.
I'm 100% certain you were also a Warner Brothers fan and
Yeah.
a Hanna-Barbera fan and all that. But were you adamant also about Harvey Comics, The Alvin Show, and Total Television as well, or were you more interested in the stuff that people have already written about before you started writing?
Let's see, what's the order of liking things? I mean, I like pretty much everything, and I probably liked Hanna-Barbera stuff first because as a little kid, it's usually, at least the traditional stuff is usually the most accessible for a small child. So I remember seeing stuff first run like Banana Splits, and I never liked Scooby-Doo much, sorry, but
I never did. I never
no.
did either.
But I mean, that's like their evergreen thing that they seem to always have, and it's like, I always liked Yogi Bear and those type of things. Gradually, I liked Jay Ward as a little kid, but I didn't appreciate it. I think when I talked to Keith Scott about it, I was telling him it's like when I was a little kid, I'd watch Rocky and Bullwinkle and enjoy it, but I didn't know it was a continuity. It was like, because they always had, join us again next time for blah, 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 or blah, blah, blah. And then the next time I'd watch, it'd be a completely different story because I wasn't ever necessarily watching every day or every week or something like that. And so I just thought that was the joke. They were always in the middle of a story. It wasn't until I started really appreciating about age 12 that I realized, wow, they actually wrote these long stories. Some of them, like the Moon Fuel, were like 40 chapters. And it's like, whoa, that's when I really became a fan. But as a little kid, I kind of liked Rocky and Bullwinkle. I liked Underdog. I never liked Tom and Jerry as much. I liked the Looney Tunes, pretty much all of them. Filmation stuff, I watched it, but I didn't like it very much. I like it more now. The Patty Freeling stuff, I love the Pink Panther when I was a kid. I loved Popeye when I was a kid.
Yeah, I can tell. I was listening to your commentaries on your Patty Freeling sets, and I could tell like there came a point when you did Crazy Like Crane. I just felt sorry for you.
Yeah, well, I was getting older at that point, and they're made for TV, and even Jerry Beck was having real troubles with.
I kind of felt sorry for you when you were watching those.
Yeah,
you and Jerry Beck were just like, and I was like, I had to turn that commentary off. It was so.
Jerry's was the funniest. There's one of his that's priceless. Just he had to get that little jab in there because it was around the end of the line for Patty Freeling stuff, and it's like it is hard. I mean, if I had to make an overall commentary on Crazy Like Crane, I could probably do it better than the way we did it, where what we had to do on those is we had to pick specific episodes and try not to pick the same one. So if Jerry picked a particular one, I typically would pick a different one, but sometimes we did the same one, but most of the time we didn't. And it's just to give it more variety. Of course, Jerry usually had first pick, so he picked like the Pink Fink and stuff like that, the Oscar-winning ones and all that stuff, which was fine. I wouldn't have minded doing this, but there are other favorites of mine, so it's no big deal. Crazy Like Crane was nobody's favorite, so it was really tough to pick and to just do it, and it's like, but I managed. But yeah, it was very difficult.
When I was watching Crazy Like Crane, I remember seeing them like on a Boomerang network, and I was like, this just looks like a bad Hippity Hopper cartoon. That's what I thought. I thought the kid acts like a mix between Sylvester Jr. and Charlie Brown.
Right.
And the Crane is just dumb. That's all I thought.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if there's a negative side on Patty Freeling overall, is just the propensity to repeat, scripts and stories from earlier cartoons and just not do them as well, unfortunately. And it wasn't necessarily due to budgets. It's just, you've seen it before, and the timing was off. It was slower, and I don't know how to explain it.
Were you a Disney fan growing up?
Yeah, I was a Disney fan, but I didn't My Disney thing is kind of weird. Yeah, I didn't mention Disney because I always think of them as like everything here and Disney. It's
Yeah.
like, I used to hate the Wonderful World of Disney show because it seemed like every week it was like a nature show, and they didn't show any of their live action films, at least any of the good ones, and they didn't show any of their cartoons. Occasionally, in the Great While, they'd have like Ludwig
Yeah.
von Drake goes to Spain or something like that, but for the most part, it was
Here-
like the Yellowstone Cubs, and it seemed like every week was the Yellowstone Cubs, and it's like, you know,
Eric Goldberg once told me on the phone, he said, much as I love Disney, because he grew up, he's a lot older than you are too. So he says, as much as I love Disney,
Yeah.
we were talking about Hanna-Barbera. I was doing an essay on Hanna-Barbera, so I asked him, would you be willing to do this? And he says, as much as I love Disney, he said, I would like turn in to the and then by the way, Tom Cito, when I asked him, he said the exact same thing verbatim. He says, I just never watched the Disneyland show. It was only nature shows or live action. I just turn it on Christmas time because then they have some from all of us to all of you. It'd be the same show. They would just have a different guy, different animated sequences.
Yeah. No,
And
they
he
did
said-
show the
said-
Winnie the Pooh shorts separately.
Yeah.
It's just like a regular special, like a peanut special. And so
Right.
they'd have a half hour for Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree, and usually they're brought to you by Sears or something. And they ran those a few years in the 70s. So I got an appreciation for that. But I mean, Mickey, Donald, and Goofy, it was like they never showed that stuff. Or if they did, they'd clump them all together. Like I remember like they do ones like On Vacation with Mickey Mouse, and it would be like little cartoons kind of tied together loosely with an underlying theme. That one wasn't too bad, but the cartoons were cut. I didn't know that at the time, but later I found out, wow, they cut scenes out of these things and stuff like that. And it's like,
with me, it was kind of weird though. With Disney, was that I was never interested in Disney until like high school.
Yeah.
And then I liked Disney because I always thought Disney was like anti Warner Brothers. Because it kind of is.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that.
Because I was always interested in Warner Brothers, Hanna-Barbera, and then like I gradually became a Disney fan.
Yeah. I did it in this order. Okay. So as a little kid, like I said, they didn't show the short cartoons. I was aware of the characters. I mean, the characters are like omnipresent, or at least they were in the 70s. So I knew who Mickey Mouse was. But, I'd see like drawings of like Clarabelle Cow and Horace Horsecollar. I never saw any of those cartoons until I was probably an adult.
Comic books, I'm sure you were familiar with.
I might have seen them in the comic books too. So, I mean, I saw the comic books but I became a fan of the parks first, Disneyland mainly, and was really intrigued. And I had a friend that was also really intrigued because they used to be really close to the best on how they did those things. Now, if you turn on Disney Plus, here's how we do all the effects in Haunted Mansion. But back then it was like, we don't tell anybody how we do it. So for years I did, how did they do the stretching room? I didn't, it's an elevator. Oops. No. It's like, but how do they do the ghosts where they're dancing around and look like they're invisible? Oh, it's a reflection thing, but they never said that back then. So I was like really intrigued. How did they do this? Slowly over time, I became a fan of the feature animated films because they started reissuing them, and I went to see them over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And then they started putting them on home video. So I had this thought, my original thought is I wanted to get all of the theatrical animated features on 16 millimeter. That shows you how old I am. And then I did finally get them all on VHS tape, which has now since been replaced by DVDs and now Blu-rays. So it's kind of funny to have just a box about so big, and it has everything from Snow White to Fox and the Hound. I have Black Cauldron too. That's kind of where I cut off, just because it's before Eisner.
which I remember when doing this. I have the same opinion of Black Cauldron you did. I did two shows, re-listen to two things though. Re-listen to your one with Jerry Beck, and I did re-listen to your one with Mort Todd. And I agree with you in Black Cauldron, by the way, what you said on that podcast, that it was not bad. It was just there.
Yeah.
And
they've done better films later, and I do have those, but to get them all on Blu-ray, I kind of stopped there arbitrarily. I could get Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and blah. But it's like, I already have them on DVD. Do I need them on Blu-ray too? I don't know. But then I got to be a fan of the shorts only because they finally put out those tins with Leonard Maltin about 10, 15 years ago. Because you got to remember, growing up, and it's just like the way it is now with Disney Plus, they only have like about 10 cartoons of each character out there.
Yeah.
You know, and then I found out,
Mickey's
wow, there's a
trailer.
lot of cartoons I've never seen before. So I was like poring over all these sets. I knew
Yeah.
about them because of Mites and Magic, but I never saw them because they didn't show them anywhere.
Yeah, it's like if you see them, like I remember the first time I saw a Disney show was like on TV, and it's always the same one. They
Yeah.
showed Mickey's trailer. That's the one they showed every 5 minutes. It was Mickey's trailer, and then they might show one of the how-to Goofy shorts. That's it.
Right. And those aren't bad shorts, but I mean, when you see them over and over and over and over and over and over, and over, like I'm that way about Looney Tunes. I was obsessed to seeing all the Looney Tunes. I
Yeah.
finally did because well, I thought we would when the Golden Collections came out, and then they stopped at Volume 6. I thought they would just keep going until they got all 1,000 cartoons out, but
Yeah. I would have thought they would do what they did with the Laserdisc, though. They would put all of those except for like the 12, the
Yeah.
11, and then the sitting on the backyard mule, which is I think much worse than the censored 11.
Right. But I ended up getting all the Looney Tunes. This dealer that dealt in bootleg videos, which I don't think he's in business anymore. Well, he sold me a set for $300. And I was willing to pay $1,000. I figured $1 a cartoon. If
Yeah,
Warner Brothers,
now they're like 14 different ways to watch them on the Internet Archive,
yeah,
all listed.
yeah. But at the time I bought this set, it's 52 discs, and it has every cartoon from what's the pilot? The pilot that's before sinking.
Bosco, the talking kid.
Yeah, that one. That one's on there, and then it goes. And I would say
To Engine Trouble?
95% of them are in watchable shape. They're not perfect because I mean they got them from various sources, from Boomerang, from Cartoon Network, from other tapes. But there's some that are just unwatchable just because they had such a bad print. So
And they're cut, I imagine, too.
probably, but in general, I was just happy to see at least what it was about, because what bugs me about characters like just the standard Looney Tunes characters is, like, you would think by this point, maybe barring like All This and Rabbit Stew or something, that there would be a complete Bugs Bunny set. In fact, they played them all on Cartoon Network as June Bugs once, and I think they cut like 10 cartoons or
I
something.
think it's like 12.
Yeah, something like that. But I said they're not all on video, and they still aren't to this day. And it's like,
but you know what? Yeah, but you know why they're not going to do it? Because then people are going to get mad. They're going to say, "Oh, why didn't you put out those 12?"
Well, I would have been happy with everything but those 12 if they put everything else, because I said there's a lot of non-offensive ones that still haven't been released, and so
they put most of them out now with that other Blu-ray.
Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing, when I watched 12,000 cartoons, they put them in chronological order. Yeah. And I should have taken notes when I was watching them, because it takes quite a bit of time to watch 1,000 cartoons. And I go, there's the first appearance of that. And there's a first appearance of that joke. And there's a first appearance of that joke.
Right.
But I didn't write that down, unfortunately. But since the Golden Collections and every other collection, they just put random stuff. Here's a Bugs Bunny disc. Here's 10 cartoons. Here's some other disc.
I was thinking that too, because weren't they originally, when they put those out? I mean, I was 3 when the first one came out.
Yeah.
But I have all 6 of them. But weren't they originally going to put them out like chronologically?
Yeah, I think the reason why they didn't, there's a couple different reasons. I mean, Jerry Beck might go this better than me, but the reasons were, if they put everything out chronologically, everybody would have to slog through a whole bunch of Boscos and Buddies before you finally got to I Haven't Got a Hat with Porky Pig. And I go, well, they could start there, and then, but barring that, I always thought my idea of what they should have done is done like 2 years at once. I don't know how exact this would work. So you put out 1930 with 1951, and then you do 1931 with 52.
What's Opera Doc?
But you just do so 1930 with 1951, 1931 with 1952, and you just keep going on. So at least one of the 2 years is good,
right?
Because a lot of the 30s stuff is, and a lot of the 60s stuff is kind of, so
Right.
yeah, because if they just put the 40s and 50s stuff, then everybody would say, who wants that other crap? But there's some good on the other. But anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll
Now,
someday put it out, but I wanted to see it before I died. That was my goal, and so I said I'm going to buy the bootleg because I want to see him, and I've seen him, so I'm happy.
and that's what I'm saying with the Disney treasures, because I was too young to buy them. So I'm like, I'm not spending $500 on them. So once I'm not out of college, I'm going to spend the $40 from a bootlegger, and that's in the United States, but he's selling them from Egypt, and it's like every reviewer is just like, thank you, and they're all from, like, Texas, and there's right.
Mhm.
And my thing about bootlegging is you're getting mad about something that has been out of print for 14 years.
Yeah. I have no problem with bootlegging. I know people who are in charge of such things are like, but my thing is this. Okay, I'll use the Batman TV series with Adam West. They taped him off the TV.
Uh-huh.
Then I got a complete set on VHS, and then I got a complete set on DVD, and then they finally put it out legitimately, and I bought that one too. So,
Yeah, that's
and
what
I got
would
rid of
do.
the earlier versions because now I have what I wanted. So it doesn't deter me from buying the real item. It
Right.
just is like I want it while you're fiddling around with rights issues and music issues and whatever issues that you're having trying to get this stuff out for me to
Now,
enjoy.
now, what was your now growing up? You mentioned in one interview that you wanted to be a cartoonist.
Yeah.
When did that change?
When?
Well, I'll just tell you one thing. I did too until I found out I couldn't draw.
Wow. See, I mean, I was always able to draw,
Yeah.
and it was probably, I'll tell you when I started thinking I wanted to be a cartoonist. Let me do that. I don't know about when I stopped, but I started drawing where I realized I could draw about third grade. So
Yeah, you were the opposite of me. That's when I learned I could. I have a family of no talents. They can't draw. They can't sing. They can't.
yeah. No, my family is talented, but none of us has made a career with it. I'm the closest to making a career with it. So
Yeah.
my sister can draw, my dad can draw, my mom can draw, my brother can draw.
Yeah,
None of
none of
us have.
mine.
What?
None of mine can draw. We can't draw straight lines.
But my dad always was of the attitude. I'll finish my story on the other thing. But my dad was always of the, if you can't make money, why do it? So that's why my dad never did it. But in my case, I didn't care about money as much as I was always picky about my own artistic talent. And I've gotten used to it, but everybody's always hypercritical about their own talents and whatever. Because I wanted to, like, I said I can't even draw like Sergio Aragones, as the Gru and Mad fame, because I figured he kind of draws kind of not childlike, but very simple, although he improved over time. That I said, yeah, I could draw kind of like him, kind of, because he used to be kind of sloppy and stuff in his execution.
He's pretty slick now.
Yeah, he's very sophisticated now, but that's because of drawing for 70 years or whatever,
Yeah.
But in my case, it's like, oh, can I put all this time and effort into doing it? Then I wanted to be an animator. And I think, and I did get a comic strip in my high school newspaper. I did get a comic strip in my junior high newspaper. And I did
published a comic strip. You tried to publish a comic strip in the 2000s too.
I tried to get comic strips published multiple times from the 80s to the 2000s. And then I did a web comic, which you probably found if you're doing all your research. And that's probably the last attempt at me doing whatever. I have drawn, I used to draw comic parodies all the time. I just take a sheet of paper and I just do a parody, like a Mad Magazine parody.
Right.
And I still have those in a drawer over here. And they used to be filthy dirty, just obnoxiously
underground.
Dirty. Yeah. And just to see how dirty I could be, because I was a kid, and it's just, and then later I thought, it'd be more challenging to see how funny I can make it without being dirty. So that was interesting that way. And people still who saw them thought they were pretty funny. Now, I think what the problem is with me being an artist is I'm kind of lazy. Because a true artist, at least in my mind, what a true artist does, yeah, you take a piece of I don't even use the right equipment. So I mean, I'm talking about traditional equipment, not digital computers. I don't, just using Bristol board, pen, ink, brush, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't like investing in all that stuff. I have, but I just like taking out a piece of paper and drawing something in pencil or pen, and I'm done. And that's it. Whereas other people, they'll take a thing and they'll sketch it out and use a blue pencil and erase the lines and get it all better.
Yeah.
And then they go back and tighten it up and and then they go back and ink it and And it's like, to me, it's like I'm drawing the same thing 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So I realized at that point, and when that point might have been in my 20s, that I don't have the discipline to be like a Charles Schultz, where you just do this and grind this stuff out day after day after day after day after
Charles
day.
Schultz is actually, contrary to people believe it, he's probably the hardest person to draw.
Oh, Peanuts characters? Yeah. They're very difficult.
Which, if you've seen what I post on the Animation Art Hall of Fakes, it's the same gallery.
Yeah.
It's horrible. They're all horrible.
Yeah.
People think they're real, but I don't know why.
Yeah.
By the way, it's never the people wanting to, it's always somebody who's buying it for somebody else and has no idea how things work.
There's only been a couple artists, like I think Sam Viviano actually can draw the Peanuts characters.
Tom Everhart, I guess, can paint them.
But yeah, most people can't. Even the people who worked with Schultz didn't draw them very well.
Yeah.
And you could tell if you get the old Dell comic books that were published in the 60s, or Gold Key ones, it's like they're okay.
I just got to my comic book convention 2 days ago.
Yeah.
2 days ago. Yeah.
The more recent ones that were by Kaboom or whatever were a little bit better, but still, it's still hard to draw like him. But so I'd say it's sometime in my 20s. I don't know exactly. Like I said, I really can't do this, but I tried all sorts of different strips. And I got wonderful rejection letters. But I did have fun along the way. I won a couple contests for the Cartoon Art Museum. They had a comic strip contest where you draw a cartoon. And I got a couple awards a couple years in a row at least. And so I had fun with it. But another reason besides my criticism of my own talent is just the whole newspaper industry change. I mean, I don't know if you know who Milton Knight is, but
I'm friends with him on Facebook.
Okay, yeah. He even wrote on Facebook today, I think. He says, why do they still publish comic strips? And it's like, I agree with you. It's like that used to be, for everyone, animation, comic books, everybody, the golden ticket, the big prize was to get your own syndicated comic strip. Not anymore.
Tex Avery, Bob Clampett, Chuck Jones, that's what they all wanted to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you think animation would be nope, it was getting a syndicated newspaper strip. Yeah.
Which I wrote here. Now let's talk about some of the movies you appeared in. I'm gonna be honest with you. I did see that movie you made in 2005 that got rejected by film festivals. It was called Blowjob.
Blowjob.
Okay, I have to ask. I saw it because I was researching. Why?
Why did we do it?
Yeah. Why did that come about?
Well, I mean, that's another many things that I would have liked to have done in my life. I mean, it's like, I always think now, if I was like 10 or 15 years old, something around that now, I'd probably be corralling friends to make little videos and putting them on YouTube. And they wouldn't be stupid ones like people tend to do, like on TikTok or something like that. It would actually be a scripted movie that actually had a plot and stuff like that. And the problem is when I was the age to do all that stuff, 10 and 15 years old, it was still all Super 8, and that stuff was really expensive. And it's just amazing to me. You could just pull out your phone and that's your camera. You used to have to lug big equipment and load up things. You could only shoot for a few minutes at a time and So born too late, I guess. I don't know. But I mean, that was one of the many things I wanted to do in my life. My life's not over. I can still do it. But I mean, along the way, the reason I did that particular movie, the the blowjob one. And of course, we gave it an alluring title, get people to watch the
Yeah,
thing.
you had
That's
to
the
recall
reason.
it
I mean,
like you had to recall it like two different things. You recalled it downsizing, you recalled it the interview.
yeah,
which
well, I do
that's a
that
different movie
in
now.
case people are offended by that title. I mean, there's nothing really offensive by the words blow or job or even blow job, but it has a connotation. So, like, oh,
Yeah.
well. But anyway, there was a time, and you'll probably ask me about this soon because you kind of alluded to it. Why do I have so many jobs? But there's a time where I had, and a few friends of mine were all unemployed. It was around 10 or 15 years ago, just because the economy was in the dumps, and so we had access to this abandoned office space, and somebody had a camera, somebody else had, and so they asked me, Mark, would you like to do a movie? And this was actually, the script came to me like in a dream, really, honestly. And I just wrote it down. And I drew it up as a comic book story. And I don't know if it was ever used as a comic book story, but somewhere I have it in a comic book form. And then I showed it to my friend who directed it. He says, "Can you turn that into a script?" And I go, "Sure, yeah." So I did. And that's the film you see. It's pretty much unaltered. But I would have loved to continue to make things like that. But I mean, after a while, if there's no money, it's like, what do you do? It's like, I mean, you haven't asked me what my dream job is, but I mean, I've thought about different dream jobs. But I used to think when like the TV show Seinfeld was on, where they have everybody sitting around a round table reading a script, just to write a script that everybody's sitting there enjoying, and of a popular TV series. I said, that would be what I'd like to do, but I don't live in Hollywood. I don't have any contacts. I've never really tried it. So it's probably never going to happen, but that seems like fun.
Right. I saw the same thing except for watching reruns of the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Yeah.
I'm like that's fun. Then I'm like, you know what? This is fun, but it doesn't make money right away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'm like this is a true story. One time I went to an all boys high school.
Yep.
And the girls' school across the street, there were some kids at that school who were really tall. Okay. And they at that in my school too. And so one of the girls was convinced that, I swear to God, this is true. She was convinced that everyone in the city of Los Angeles, not just Hollywood, not the one who works for, was rich. Everyone who had ever been in a movie lived in Los Angeles and was rich. I'm like, no. By the way, this same person didn't know where France was on the map. So, and I was just like, no, that's not how this works. You don't appear in a movie. Most people who appear in movies are not rich.
Right.
Right. Which now I have this list of jobs that you've had. They range from ISB channel to United Cable to the Metro. I have this long list and I didn't even finish it.
Somebody was asking me the other day, why do you put them all on LinkedIn? I mean, you're killing yourself for getting a job, but it's like,
no, I found your jobs a different way.
Okay.
I went through the Internet Archive and then went to your website from 2001.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
I just Internet Archived your website 2001 and said right there, resume, pressed it. And like the resume seemed to change every time you go back.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, I mean, I don't know anybody who actually works, gets a job and stays in the career for 60 years and retires or whatever it is.
Al Jaffe. Al,
what?
You can say it, Mad Magazine.
Yeah, but I mean now, if you started now, or even when I did, so I mean, my dad even jumped around, not as much as I have. But I didn't even jump. I started work in 1985.
Right.
And throughout college, I just worked in the college bookstore. So I worked at 2 bookstores because I went to 2 colleges. Then I got my first real job, and I worked at Channel 44 in San Francisco. And what I wanted to do at that
list.
What?
So it's right there on the list.
Yeah. And what I wanted to do when I got in that job was I was done wanting to be a cartoonist, even though behind the scenes, I did try, but I didn't want to be an animator anymore.
Right. I
I
do have one question, and I gotta
yeah,
interrupt you. One of the reasons where you wanted to be didn't want to be an editor, was it also because during that time in animation, it was just kind of a dump?
that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I wanted to be in the animation, and my sister went through the same epiphany. She wanted to be a fashion designer, but she really wanted to be Edith Head.
Right.
And it's like there are no Edith Heads in Hollywood anymore.
Right.
I wanted to be like a Friz Freleng, a Chuck Jones, whatever. I wanted to be somebody, making a bunch of funny cartoons, Tex Avery, whatever, fill in the blank.
Right.
It's like
You
that
didn't
doesn't
want to be stuck
exist
at
anymore.
Filmation. You didn't want to be stuck at Filmation.
Yeah. And I mentioned Milton Knight. Milton Knight, and I've even told him before many times. I said, "You lived exactly what I wanted to do, and I'm now glad I didn't do it." And he kind of shrugged and said, "Yeah," because he's only 3 years older than me. And I have another friend who's a few years older than me. He's Mike Cazala. He did the same thing. He went into the animation. They all worked for Filmation. They all worked for DePatie. Well, I don't know if they worked for DePatie Frilling, but they all worked for Hanna-Barbera. Everybody worked for, they all did it and everything like that. In the tail end of when they still kind of did everything in the United States, and they still had a little bit of creative freedom, but you saw everything kind of.
Yeah.
And when I decided this is too much work and too much effort for a bunch of garbage on TV, I mean, I felt this when I graduated high school in '84. It's just going to get worse. Now, I didn't know in the next few years we'd have DuckTales and we'd have The Simpsons and Animaniacs and Tiny Toons and Batman Adventures and all that stuff. But even now, it's like in SpongeBob and Ren and Stimpy and all that stuff. But it's like I see shows like how they made Ren and Stimpy and stuff like that now, and it's like I wouldn't have fit in. I'm just not that kind of personality. I mean, I probably would have socked John Kricfalusi in the face just because he's so obnoxious and overbearing, So, and this is long before he got in trouble for things, it's just his general demeanor. It was like, it didn't fit with me,
I saw the same thing. I remember when I was younger, listening to audio commentaries with him, and I was like, and I remember with him and Eddie Fitzgerald, and I was like, kind of like Eddie Fitzgerald, but the other guy is kind of pretentious. And I didn't know, but I was just like skip over those because I thought he was kind of mean.
Well, I used to do imitations of the people, and I did this for Jerry Beck, but it's been so long. I'd have to re-listen to the Golden Collection, but I imitated everybody else's commentaries because I wanted to do a commentary. And Jerry said this one time, and at the time I was a little bit insulted, but he said he wasn't meaning to be insulting. He just said, "You have to be asked," and it's like, I thought, well, how pompous is that? You have to be asked. It's like they should know that I like cartoons. I should be able to do one, especially. And this is where I talked to Jerry about this. As I said, like John Kricfalusi. This is John Kricfalusi. I remember this imitation well. This is John Kricfalusi watching a Bob Clampett cartoon. Opening credits. Da, 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 da. This is John Kricfalusi. Look at this cartoon. Oh my God, that's so funny. Ah, wow. 7 minutes later. Wow. Bob Clampett's great. That's all, folks. And I imitated, all of them, Ford and Barrier and everybody, just because they all had, I even did Jerry Beck, it's like, this is Jerry Beck, and I have to, and he had a very kind of clinical way of doing it. I think he's kind of loosened up because I told him about it. I thought he did better on the Patty Freeling ones, but on the Looney Tunes, this is Jerry Beck. And
I actually like Jerry, and
but he's very informative, so I couldn't really knock.
I like Mike Barrier also because Mike Barrier had those great audio stuff.
Yeah, and that, but I would imitate it like this. I go, "This is Michael Barrier.
Michael Barrier has
I have this interview with Friz Freleng from 1942, and I'm going to play it for you right now." It's like it was poor fidelity. I was exaggerating.
How does the conversation of I'm going to imitate the people in the Golden Collections come up in a conversation with Jerry Beck?
Because I wanted to do those commentaries, and that was his response. And I said, I can do them better than him. In fact, I can imitate. I was down in San Diego when I said all that. It was funny, but it is funny that I did eventually get to do some commentaries. And I was asked. I didn't, anytime. The only time I tried to do one where I asked somebody, "Can I do the commentaries?" I was lined up to do the commentaries for Tweety and Sylvester Mysteries DVD, and then they canceled the commentaries before they put the DVD out. So, so there you go.
Yeah, and which one of the things that surprised me was that you were not in the commentaries for, which by the way are good, the novel tune set that Thunderbean did.
Yeah, I've never done any of them.
Yeah, which I thought about why, but then I remembered also because they had already released those commentaries were holdovers from the other set.
Yeah. Well, also, I'm not close, chummy friends with Stanchfield. I mean, it's like, I think we've talked to each other maybe once. It's not like I'm avoiding him or anything. It's like not like he's avoiding me. We just don't really cross paths that much. I mean, I'll buy his stuff. I buy his stuff all the time, but it doesn't mean I actually talk to him.
He'll appear if he asks you, you let him appear on the show.
Yes. Steve, come on the show.
Now,
if you bring him on, I'll talk to him. Yeah, I've seen him on Stu Showstack's show, and he's been on others. So
yeah. And now my next question for you is, why move to Oregon? I'm just asking, why move to Oregon?
Well, at this point, it's kind of like a big why, but the original reason was I had a different girlfriend 6 years ago, and her daughter was living up here, and she had some friends that moved up here. And I was living at my dad's house because I moved back home after my divorce, and I was staying way too long, in my opinion. My dad didn't mind me being there. I wanted to leave. But if you are not familiar with the San Francisco Bay Area, it's probably more pricey than LA. It's just really expensive because that's where all the high-tech engineers are. Excuse me, for Apple and for Google and for name any high-tech company you know about, HP, whatever. They're all home based there in Silicon Valley. And as a result, it's like, and I wasn't working in it. I was working, you see all of my jobs. I worked at newspapers. I worked on the peripheral of like high-tech companies, but I never made the big bucks. And so if I was ever going to get out on my own, this is my opportunity. So I moved up here with a girlfriend. It didn't work out after 3 years, and she gave me the boot. Got a different girlfriend, and now we're actually contemplating moving back to California. So there we go, but not to the Bay Area. Probably more in the middle of the state where it's a little less expensive. So anyway.
Now, my next question for you is, I'm going to ask you about your books.
Okay.
I'm not going to talk to you about all of them, but I'm going to talk about specific ones. First of all, I am going to ask you about two specific different things. One of them is, I remember when I was doing my the thing I helped with Amber, which I really hated that people kept crediting me for being heavily involved in it. I was just like her chief cheerleader and how would direct her things.
On our Bill Scott documentary? No.
Yeah. And the other thing I did was I helped her with her John Sutherland part, which that's why Harry McCracken, Jerry Beck was invited also, but of course he had just gotten married when that documentary premiered. Jerry Beck. That's why Carl Cohen was there. That's why Paul Echeverry was there. That's why they were at that premiere. So now you told me that you were going to make a John Sutherland book, write a John Sutherland book.
Yeah.
Which that became the Hogan's Alley article.
No, flip that around.
Okay. Then I was just going to ask, how did the article itself come about?
Okay, how the article came about, that was a request, because I was writing for Hogan's Alley already, or that might have been my first article for Hogan's Alley. I'm trying to think. I could have this in the wrong order, but he wanted an article about John Sutherland. That's what I remember on that one.
Yeah.
Whether it was my first article or second, I can't remember. It seems like it was my first. It might have been my first one, but I had written stuff for other publications prior to that.
Yeah.
Comic Book Marketplace was my first.
And you had done your Harvey.
But when Hogan's Alley wanted me to write, he says, "Can you do an article about John Sutherland?" and I didn't even know who he was.
Yeah.
Well, you got to remember, this is before Hamid Amidi did his book. There was nothing about this guy. And I hated that I got the assignment to do it like a year after the guy died. But I got in contact with his son, and his son told me everything about it. But I could have actually talked to his dad, the real John Sutherland, like a year earlier. And he was like with it till the end, but oh well. But I didn't know anything about him. And then I found out that he did these little cartoons for Captain Kangaroo, children's show called The Most Important Person. And I said, oh, because I never knew who did those. I never paid attention to who did what too much when I was a little kid. I just saw this stuff. And then the dots started to connect. And so I talked to John Sutherland Jr., I talked to Bill Melendez, I talked to a couple of other people.
You used some interviews with Bill Scott, I know.
Yeah, that was archival, of course, even then. And I did a little research about UPA because I knew a lot of the same people worked with both. I found Sutherland worked for Disney on Fantasia and Bambi, at least. I don't remember everything. And when it got time to do books, since I did so much research at the time, I thought it would be natural that I could turn it into a book, because the downside about Hogan's Alley is it's a very niche magazine. So unless people like you and I read it, nobody knows about it. The average person,
I wish that magazine was better advertised, because it could get a lot more people to read it.
Yeah. Well, I wish it was just on the newsstands as a regular publication, but I get it. I published a fanzine for 21 years. It's tough.
It's a thick, and I think unlike your fanzine, Hogan's Alley is a thick magazine.
Yeah.
That and the Disney Annual Institute review books that did your against us, those are thick magazines. Those aren't magazines. Those are just yearly annuals.
Yeah. And even if you put every issue of Harveyville I did in 1 year, it might come close to about 100 pages. Right. But I was doing 4 a year back then. Right. So but it is a tough business. But I always, you talk about career aspirations. I was always wanting to be in publishing or in cartoons or something. And the only thing that kind of I ended up doing, which is kind of odd because I didn't originally think I was any good, also was writing. And so I never thought I'd be writing books. And then I realized why I ended up liking and doing writing, because I said, oh, I get it. Because in school, they always say, write a review or write a book report about this. Write a book report about this book that you hate. I mean, it's just this long, dreary, nothing novel that you don't want to read. And that's what I thought writing was. And it's like, well, my interest is less on novels and more on biographies and autobiographies of real life people. Right. And mainly actors and people in show business, some in comic books and other things, but that's generally what I read now. So
I try to do that, and I would fit it in school. It got weird when I did a Simpsons clip in a school in a coming to a Catholic high school. So we did a Simpsons clip and a prayer. Teacher hated it. Deacon loved it. So the teacher loved it.
So, I mean, I don't know if I answered the earlier question you asked about me jumping
John
around.
Sutherland.
You want John Sutherland? Okay, go ahead.
It's going to be a book, you said, and you didn't say why it didn't become a book.
Oh, why it didn't become a book? If I leave you hanging on anything, just go back and ask it. John Sutherland, I wanted it to become a book. I tend to work with Bear Manor a lot. I'm trying to look around to other publishers, but he wasn't very interested, i.e., I don't think he knew who he was. So he did, he didn't grasp that he could actually publish a book about John Sutherland. I thought he was a very fascinating person once I got to know who he was, but I wasn't good in convincing the publisher that that was a good book to do. And I didn't feel like self-publishing it, so it just kind of went away. And then, like I said, that book by Amit Amidi came out about mid-century animation or
It's just very
something.
modern. It's really good.
Yeah. And I said, well, I mean, he didn't go as in depth as I did, but he did talk about him quite a bit. And so I just kind of left it there. I mean, the Hogan's Alley there article is there for anybody who wants to read it. If you want me to do a book, I'll do a book, but you got to be interested as a publisher. If you're not, obviously I can't convince somebody to do a book, to publish a book, that.
And then the other two things I wanted to talk to you two more about, two different articles you did for Hogan's Alley, because I actually have your Hogan's Alley books.
Okay.
So your ABC of Hand Tools article. This was interesting because I read this thing not knowing what those films were. I had never seen them.
Well, I think I talk about it in the article, but the basic thing was I had this book called forgive me if I get the title wrong, but it's like the Encyclopedia of Disney animated cartoon characters, and it's supposed to have every character ever made up until like whenever the book came out, and even minor characters that are only on screen for seconds or whatever.
It's like a DC book. It's like if DC wrote an encyclopedia.
Yeah. So I mean, I remember like it had the Great Mouse Detective, and it had a drawing of the hopelessly merry juggling octopus, and I said, I don't even remember that character in that film. That's when the book came out. I've seen it since. So yeah, there he is. But I mean, I'm just saying that's how obscure it got, a juggling octopus and Great Mouse Detective. So I'm looking through the book, and my dad always talked about that there was this character he saw in a film when he was in high school called, he didn't know the name of it, but he said it had this character named Primitive Pete. And I had the book and I was thumbing through it, and he said, is it this reason and emotion that are in this film? There's these two little caveman characters. And my dad said, no, it's not that. It was, and so it became like a sticking point because my dad kept saying, and my dad has done that through all my entire life. He's like pointed out things that I didn't believe were true. And more often than not, it actually was true. It's just that nobody had done any research on it. My dad just remembered something. And it was tough finding that film. Not so much maybe now. Well, I don't know. Even now, I had to do. This was before DVDs. I found out
now. We can just all look it up online.
Yeah, it wasn't. There's no internet then. I finally tracked it down. That was made by General Motors just by sheer luck. And I contacted General Motors. I think they're still in Detroit, and they had a copy of it on VHS in the reference library, and they were not willing to let me have a copy of it because they thought I'd just put it out and bootleg it and blah, 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 blah. So then I started going through college libraries. Fortunately, I was living near Stanford University, and strangely, miraculously, whatever, they had a copy of it on VHS also. And I could check it out, for like, I think 2 days or something crazy like that. And my dad actually had the ability to copy a VHS cassette. So I checked this thing out and we copied it onto another cassette. And then I returned it back to the library. And I watched this thing over and over, writing notes about it. And I took screen grabs, and that became the article. But I mean, that was a tough one because I didn't believe that it existed. I think I found out that there was a booklet about that. So that kind of was like a piece of the puzzle that was issued around the same time. But because Disney doesn't fully own it, it's co-owned by General Motors, there's no like real rush for Disney to put it out. It's also highly dated, and present Disney seems to not even have any interest. Like they could throw it on Disney Plus, why not? But they won't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They could have thrown it on the treasure sets. They could have.
Yeah, they could have done that too.
The Disney Rarities volume where they had like the Alice comedies, and they threw in like Ferdinand the Bull. I would have shocked that they wouldn't throw it there.
Well, even on the Rarity, I don't know if it was that one, but one of them they did put like a few obscure Disney things, like I remember How to Rivet or something like that, Yeah. And then I don't know if it's on there, but there's like they did the story of menstruation, just bizarre films like that. It's like,
Yeah,
You
and
know,
now,
and now with
now
YouTube, everything's there. You know,
third
so,
article I wanted to mention was your interview with Thurl Ravenscroft.
yeah.
How did that become out? And I also want to ask you about one of the questions.
Okay.
Because was it burning in your head to ask him? By the way, first, was it burning in your head to ask him, do you eat the cereal?
I don't know if it's burning in my head. It just came up
Yeah,
because I was thinking, you know, they always talk about, you know, you've seen it in different,
right.
you know, parodies of people doing advertising, you know, like, you know, that they promote the product and then they'll try it and they don't even like it, you know. So it was just my thought. Here's this guy who's been advertising it for like 40 years or 50 years or however long it was. Did he ever try it, or did he say, that's kid stuff, I don't like Frosted Flakes, I don't like sweet cereals, whatever, you know? So I was just curious. So it was a question that came along for that. And
Yeah.
that was the only reason of doing it, you know, just to
How
see
did
if he
that-
actually
how did that
endorsed the
interview come
product.
out?
What?
How did
What?
that interview come out?
How?
About?
Or why? Oh, that one, the publisher, Tom Heinches of Hogan's Alley, he wanted an interview with him, which I found quite odd. And he said I could do it. You know, he gave it to me. And I found it quite odd for two reasons. One, Hogan's Alley isn't totally into animation. I mean, it is, but it's more into comic strip art. So I thought it was kind of odd of him wanting to get an interview with Thurl Ravenscroft. Like, I don't think he's done, like, he never did a June Foray interview or a Mel Blanc interview, you know, people they could have done, you know, but he wanted to throw Ravenscroft. So I said, all right, I'll dig him up, you know. And
that's what's cool about it, though.
I didn't know where to find him. And you know, actually the one good thing about I don't know if it's easy now because, you know, enough time's passed, but you know, elderly voice artists, and you know, because when I interviewed Keith Scott, he said the same thing. I said, how did you find Dawes Butler? He says, I just looked it up and I found his address. I wrote him a letter. So it's just like, I looked it up and I found his phone number and I called him up. You know, and it's like nowadays everybody would be unlisted or private or whatever.
Yeah.
But so I interviewed it. The amazing thing about the whole thing is I was still recording interviews on cassette tapes. And if you've ever recorded anything off the telephone with a cassette tape, the fidelity is pretty bad. Okay, like today's digital recorders are far superior.
Yeah,
so,
that's all.
Because you get all this hiss.
That's all I've needed to use.
Yeah, but have you ever heard a cassette tape? There's like all this hiss and everything like that.
Yeah, I know it. I've heard a cassette.
Yeah. So even if you're listening to an old record album that you know pre-recorded cassette of some album, it's still kind of inferior to vinyl or CD or anything else. At least I feel that way. And anyway, so there was no good equipment really. I had a machine that plugged right in the phone, but it was not the best. And Thurl, I forgot how old he was at the time. He was probably in his 90s at that point. Didn't speak above a whisper. And the only time you ever heard of him, if you play the tapes back, and then you'd hear me say, well, did you ever eat the cereal? Wow, that's really great. You know, so you hear me fine. You don't hear him at all, except when he does an imitation of Tony the Tiger. Suddenly, they're great, you know, and it's like, wow, you know, so that's really the only thing. So I was freaking out because I had listened to this interview. Fortunately, I mean, I recorded this interview and I couldn't play it back or listen to it. Fortunately, I had taken copious notes while I was recording it because I thought in the off chance, maybe this won't record very well. I just was like having a bad premonition that came true. And so, and since I played it back, like literally after I got on the phone with him, I was able to piece it together where I remembered pretty much what he said and filled in the blanks, you know, and if I played it over and over, I could kind of make it out, but it's like, unfortunately, it's not of a quality that, you know, I don't even think any high-tech equipment could clear up all the hiss and everything to make it audible. So what you get in that article is what it was. And turns out it was the final interview with him, but I didn't know that at the time. I think he died a year later or something like that.
By the way, I did forget to ask you one thing that was besides this that I was going to ask you before I got to your books, which was you were put you were put as one of the most famous Saratogans.
They were doing. There's a Saratoga Museum. Saratoga, if you don't know, is a pretty small town. It's mainly businesses. There's like one street that had, I mean, it mainly residential. There's one street really that has businesses, and it's a little hoity-toity. It's a rich area. We'll just be blunt. And I didn't know I was in a rich area growing up. I just figured, I'm living where I'm living. It wasn't until later. But anyway, they have this little museum that exists out of like a really old building, because Saratoga is a pretty old city. It goes back to the 1800s sometime. And they made this advertisement saying, we're going to do this thing for famous Saratogans. And I said, well, I just wrote a book about total television, so I kind of pigeonholed my way into it, because I don't know how famous I was.
Yeah. But it's interesting, if you read your Wikipedia page, it reads it as you had your own exhibit in a museum about famous Saratogans.
Yes.
So basically, it reads as if they have statues of you everywhere.
Well, the only exhibit is they had my book on display and maybe a couple photographs.
But it
wasn't a statue.
It literally states on Wikipedia that you were honored as an exhibit.
Yeah.
In it as not in an exhibit. It says as an exhibit.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I wrote that or but anyway, the thing I felt that was to my benefit, at least at the time, not true now, is I was actually still living in Saratoga, because, they had other people like Steven Spielberg graduated from my high school. Well, he got out of there as second he could, get his feet to Universal Studios. He was not in Saratoga very long. In fact, he didn't even grow up in Saratoga. He grew up in Phoenix. So, and then at the time, there was a couple of Olympic people that, but none of them lived in Saratoga anymore. And
so you were there.
I was actually there. So that's why I kind of said, hey, I'm actually here.
Yeah. Now let's go to total television. You have said in other interviews, but not on your podcast, how your total television book came about.
Okay.
Did it originate from the Hogan's Alley article?
Yes.
Okay.
But here's the course of events. I think originally I like to write about Rocky and Bullwinkle. Jay Ward is my first love over total television.
Yeah.
Then Keith Scott finally put out his book, Moose That Roared, and I said, well, I can't top that. I don't want to. So I'll probably never do a Jay Ward book unless I did something specifically that Jay Ward.
And an art one too, because that one's already.
Yeah, but even Gerald Van Sitters did that. Yeah, so it'd have to be, if I did a Jay Ward book, I'd have to take a different angle. Like even Amber's thing, if that was a book, I could do a Bill Scott book, let's say, but I don't really want to do that either. But I mean, I always like to have a different angle on something.
Right.
So
I always wanted to do a Fractured Flickers book. That's what I wanted to do. I don't know why, but I want to write a book on Fractured Flickers.
Well, you can. I mean, he only had a chapter, so you can embellish on it, because I mean, that's what I did with my DePatie Freeling book. Jerry Beck did a Pink Panther book, but he didn't talk about the TV cartoons. So that led to that one. Now, going back to total television. So after, this is why I think the John Sutherland book, the John Sutherland article is first.
Yeah.
Is because Tom asked me at that point what I'd like to write. And I actually said, based because of the Keith Scott book, I said, I want to know what happened to the people who made those total television cartoons, because in the 60s, they had King Leonardo and they're doing Tennessee Tuxedo and Underdog, and then suddenly they're gone. And there's nothing about them. If you watch the cartoons, they don't have credits. And so I just took it upon myself. That's what I'd like to find out. And so Tom said, all right, write an article about it. So it became an article, and I managed to track down Buck Biggers and Chet Stover, because they had just written a book called How Underdog Was Born. So that was like their version of the book. So it's, but I didn't like their book as much because it didn't answer all my questions.
Yeah.
It's a good book, but it only really talks about literally how up to underdog. So it didn't say whatever happened to the studio. And that's what I wanted to know. And then, even when I interview them, it's like, why does everybody want to know that? I go, I want to know that. I want to know what happened. Why aren't you not making cartoons now that I loved when I was a kid? And they didn't see it that way. They were just like, oh, we made these cartoons in the 60s and it became too tough to make, and we didn't make them anymore. It's like they didn't think about it. They didn't think about fandom. That
And I wanted to ask, and I just want to ask this for my own personal curiosity. What did they think about the Underdog film?
Buckbeard.
I can already imagine what you thought of it, but I can already think.
What do
about
I think of it?
Yeah.
If it wasn't Underdog, I think it would be a greater movie.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you just hated it, but
if it wasn't based upon Underdog, it's not that bad of a just basic superhero story. It's for kids, but I mean, the fact that they tied it into Underdog, then you have to kind of think of it on that level, and you got, because I'm not too big on live action remakes. I mean, sometimes they can be successful, but a lot of times it's like, why are you doing this? Why can't you make a theatrical cartoon?
I actually hated the Chipmunks movie, but I had to rewatch it. I rewatched it somehow.
Oh, the recent one.
The first one I don't hate. I found out I don't hate it because it's got all that innuendos to the Alvin show. I actually like that because then you can actually ignore the movie. It's good enough there's enough there to ignore the movie and how bad the movie is.
Yeah.
To just pay attention to the hidden stuff where you can like the first one.
Yeah. And I'll agree. I didn't see all four of those. I only saw the first two.
By the way, before we get to what Buckbears, what do you think about the Casper movie? Because that freaked me out as a kid.
I like it, but I don't love it because I always envision a Casper movie being set in the Enchanted Forest with Wendy and everything like that. So actually, of the live action Casper movies that were made during that time, I like the Casper meets Wendy the best.
I'm gonna tell you right now, when I was a kid, I saw that scene where Casper's in the bed with the girl creeped me out.
You mean the original one with Christina Ricci?
It scared the hell out of me. Huh. And looking back, and you look at photos, and you're like, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah. Well, see, that's what I felt that they kind of shouldn't have gone there and stuff like that. But I mean, I appreciate it. Like the Harvey family hated that film. They didn't like the Lazarus machine. They didn't want anything to do with Casper being dead and coming back to life and stuff like that. And I get it, So they hate that film. Leonard Maltin hated that film. If you look at his film book, it says bomb. Well, there's some funny stuff in it. So I don't know if I'd give it a bomb, but I wouldn't give it 4 stars either. I'd probably give it like 2.5, 3, maybe. So
we're gonna get to Harvey in a second, but first I want to know, what did Buck Biggers think about think about that Underdog movie?
Well, when I talked to them about it, Chet Stover didn't really say anything about it. Buck Biggers acted like he liked it. Now I'm doing my new TTV scrapbook that's coming out any day now, and I talked to Vicky Burke.
When can we get a sign? When can I buy a signed copy?
If I have a copy, I'll get you one. I don't have one yet. If you have a digital copy, I'll sign the computer. Anyway,
no, it's not as fun.
DocuSign. Anyway, Victoria Biggers said that her dad enjoyed it. When I interviewed Buck, he said he enjoyed it. I think also he had a little piece of the action, so I think he enjoyed it on that level. But he felt that they did a reasonable job. Now, the person you need to ask, which I think I do put it in my original Total Television book, is Joe Harris. He hated it. He didn't understand why they made a live action Underdog film at all.
He thought what I thought.
Yeah. And for me, I probably never would have watched it if I wasn't doing the book. That's the honest truth about it. There's sometimes, I don't know if you have situations like this, that you watch something because you're writing an article or you're doing some research, so you have to watch it. But otherwise, you probably would not touch it with a 10-foot pole. you know,
Yeah.
and so that was one of them. I probably never would go watch an underdog movie. Then, like I said, if it wasn't tied to underdog, it's not a bad super dog kids flick, you know. But the fact that it is underdog, it's
make
like,
it a little bit better of a crypto film. It would still be
yeah,
it would still
yeah,
be bad, but
yeah. Or just, you know, not even related to Superman, just a powerful superhero type dog that had nothing to do with Superman or underdog or anything, you
yeah.
know. It's not a bad little kids flick, you know. It's not, you know, very sophisticated, but there's a couple of
Now,
good scenes in
for
it.
my next question is, I got two questions for you about Harvey Comics. First of all, is when you're doing a panel, I've talked about Harvey Comics, and I've even been asked this question is I'm sure you know what I'm going to ask. Is Casper the ghost of Richie Rich? How many times have you been asked that question?
Enough to be put into a book. You know, there's a book called Do Elephant Jump by David Feldman, and he asked me that question. I gave a very thorough answer on that, so really want to read that answer. It's pretty much the same answer today. And what really it existed before that Simpsons episode, but
Yeah.
that Simpsons episode is really what caused everybody to think that, you
Yeah.
know, because really all the characters look alike, which is actually part of the reason I was enamored with the Harvey thing. It's like, wow, they all have the same face. It doesn't matter who it is, little Audrey, little Dot, Wendy, Casper, they all have the same face. They're just different hair, different clothes, you know.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was kind of interesting, you know, like even Peanuts Charlie Brown characters don't look so identical, you know.
No.
Some of them look, you know, have smaller noses, some have pointy noses, some have little lines around their eyes that way, you know. But the Harvey characters, they all look the same, unless you're talking about like Baby Huey or something.
Or Herman and Catnip.
Yeah, but
they really kept
the
their
kid characters all had the same basic face.
yeah. Which
Yeah.
I never cared for Richie Rich, but I liked Casper.
Yeah.
Because I feel like Casper could do something interesting, and I only like Casper, like, you know, in the early, because Casper could be interesting because then somebody could get scared of him or something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, the problem what I hate about Richie Rich was in the beginning was it's called The Poor Little Rich Boy. I just always thought that was kind of pretentious. I don't know why, but I never picked up a Richie Rich comic book because I'm like, who does this kid think he is?
Well, I mean, it's supposed to kind of show that he's not so big on himself. The funny thing is, later versions say the richest kid in the world. He's like, screw you, I'm rich, you know, kind of like that. So, you know, Richie Rich was never my favorite, although when he did the adventure stories like in the mid 70s,
Right.
they're kind of like the adventures of Tintin. And even Ernie Colon, one of the artists on those, said that he was thinking Tintin the whole time he was doing them. And I loved Tintin as a kid. So yeah, I got it for that. But Casper was always my favorite because I always tended to like monster stuff.
Yeah. And the
Yeah,
thing about Casper is Casper, I think what I like about Casper also is they kind of kept the thing in the Famous Studio is that even like somewhere in the story, they'd have some little gag where, like, you know, some older person would just get scared of him.
Right. So, well, I didn't like those as much. I mean, I watched them, but
Right.
you know, they're very repetitious, or they're going,
Right.
oh, ghosts, you know. I'm like, okay, here we go again.
Now, the next book I wanted to talk about, though, is the Harvey Comics Companion. Was that just you wrote a book about did that just come out like somebody asked you, or did it just like you wrote the Harveyville Fun Times? Why not?
When I was doing Harveyville Fun Times, that was the first time I thought about, if I do enough material on this, I can make a book. And it's amazing to me. I could go on for an hour on this, so I won't. But it's amazing to me. There had been so many aborted attempts of doing a history of Harvey Comics book by various publishers. And I started to peddle my version around. And over the years, everybody said, oh, nobody's interested in Harvey Comics. You know, so finally, I gave up on the idea. I did do a best of Harveyville Fun Times because I figured
That was the first one.
it was an exercise to see if I could do my own book. That's all it was, because a friend of mine had a Disney fanzine about theme park attractions, and he compiled them into a book published by Lulu, which is one of the first self-publishing things that you could do, you know, for nothing. And it's like, it still exists. And so I said, maybe I could do that. And I could do a best of Harveyville Fun Times. So, and I said, well, that's the compromise because nobody wants to publish my Harvey history book. So at least I'll get that one out. And it kept going after that. It's like people, you know, even Jerry Beck was working on one with Leslie Cabarja at one point. It didn't happen.
Would you help on those the Dark Horse stuff too?
Those came out. Those did come out, but they were going to do an actual Harvey history book too. Never came out. And I even have the proofs of those. I shouldn't say that. Jerry Beck goes, "What? You have that?" No, Leslie sent them to me. So I have a bunch of stuff that could have been published, you know, by various people, and it never happened. Finally, I stopped publishing Harveyville in 2011, and it was about 2014 that Tomorrow said, "We're doing all these companion books. They have like a DC companion, a Fawcett companion, a Warren companion, whatever companion. Would you like to do a Harvey one?" I said, "Of course." So you know, I was kind of bummed because a lot of people had died by that point, so I couldn't interview them. So I had to rely on older interviews and stuff. It turned out all right because I got other interviews. But then they got cold feet about it. And finally, I just pulled it from them because I don't know why they had cold feet. You'd have to ask them. Yeah, you know, they couldn't get the rights to the reproduction rights for images and stuff, so they were worried about that, and they didn't think anybody would buy it. And so finally, I went to the old reliable Bear Manor. He said, "I'll publish it now," and so that's how it came out.
So now I do ask you a quick question, which I actually got this, which I'm gonna be honest, I think it's even better when you read it by itself. When I bought your Total Television book signed, the first thing I bought was the audiobook too. What was it like to have to figure out to yourself that, like, man, my book is now an audiobook?
Well, that wasn't my choice either. I agreed to it, but I mean, I wanted to do the actual audio version. And he didn't want me to do it at the time, which I thought was weird because I said, "I'm the author and I'm willing to do it."
Yeah.
So it was actually more difficult. I don't know if I'm answering your question about it, but you know, I didn't even think about audio editions, but when he did do it, it was a pain in the neck because the guy that recorded it, he didn't know how to pronounce any of the names. So I'm listening through it and I said, "Well, this isn't pronounced like this. I can't even remember all the different names and words."
So you listened to your whole book?
Yeah. You know, and I had to correct it. So the correct version is the version, but it was just, you know, if you had me do the audio version in the first place, I would have done it correctly, but oh well.
Now, the next couple books, to Patty Freeling, how did that come about? Was it?
That one was based because Jerry Beck did a big Pink Panther book, and he only talked about the theatrical cartoons, and I really wanted to know more about the TV cartoons. There's one page where he shows a picture of the Super Six, and I go, "I remember that show. Why didn't he talk about that?"
Right.
You know, he explained because I talked to him about it. It's like, you know, he was under contract with DK Publishing, and they wanted a lot of big pictures. That's what it's essentially a picture book. It has
Yeah,
some
you wrote the
information.
Looney Tunes one too.
It has some information in it, but it's like it's more picture book than like mine to Patty Freeling book.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was thinking about all the different studios, and I tried to do this. Yeah, I could have written a Hanna-Barbera book. There's other Hanna-Barbera books. Yeah, I could have written a book about Disney.
I still, and I talked to Jerry Beck about this. I still think he wrote the best HB book.
The best what?
The best Hanna-Barbera book.
Oh yeah.
Because you open that book up and it's like, that's what people like us think about Hanna-Barbera.
Right. Yeah, and I agree. But I mean, if you want the complete story, there's probably 4 decent big books of Hanna-Barbera.
Mike Mallory wrote a good one.
Yeah, and if you get all 4 of them, yeah, it's pretty much covered.
Yeah.
Now, could I go and make another one? Sure, but it's like they said, I don't really want to do a Hanna-Barbera book because I thought to do it properly, it's going to be this big ass book because they had so many series.
Yeah.
And
which there is one book.
If you want to make it thorough, I mean, if you're just doing a listing of things and just say, "Help, it's the Hair Bear Bunch," and then this happened, and then Roman's Holidays.
You have Stuart
and then...
Fisher's Hanna-Barbera cartoons book?
Yeah.
Do you have Stuart Fisher's Hanna-Barbera book?
Probably, but you have to tell me.
It is the one book that I have bought that I regret.
Oh.
It is not good.
Oh, then I probably don't have.
It looks like it was just pulled together. There's 0 images, by the way.
Oh, okay.
And it looks like it was pulled together off Wikipedia.
Oh, okay. No, I don't have that one. I tried not to do that. So and I looked around. I thought about Rankin Bass, but Rick Goldschmidt has that kind of nailed down. So I said, no, I'm not. I thought about doing Filmation, but Andy Mangels and Dwayne McDuff, they've done other ones. And then I said,
there's still one studio that's never been written in English, which is the MGM studio.
For TV, you mean, or just
for
yeah. But I didn't want to do. I didn't want to do theatrical. I didn't want to do theatrical either. I kind of think that Jerry kind of covered all the theatrical stuff, and so I was thinking more of television. Now, granted, Patty Freeling did do a lot of theatrical stuff,
right?
But it ends. If you go by Of Mice and Magic, there's no Patty Freeling chapter.
Yeah.
It is just that, and the rest of the story. Right. And which I asked him about that the first time I met him, and he goes, "Well, I wanted those chapters, but Leonard didn't. Leonard Maltin." And
I asked, the first thing I asked Jerry when I said Mice and Magic, and I asked him that exact same question. He says, "Well," and I asked Leonard Maltin the same question too, because he wrote that thing on TV cartoons for Film Comment. I'm like, why couldn't that part have been like the other chapter of Mice and Magic?
Yeah.
Too. And he says, because I'm more interested in the theatrical stuff. That's all I gave. And I said, okay.
That is true. I mean, now you haven't mentioned the Frozen and Ice, but the Disney book.
I was going to ask about Frozen and Ice.
But I'll say that one because it connects. It connects to these other ones. This is how I write these books. It's like, so I read Keith Scott's Jay Ward book, and he mentions Total Television, saying, "Oh, those cartoons aren't very good." He's since said, "No, they're not that bad." But that inspired me to write the other one. Jerry Beck does this Pink Panther book, but it doesn't talk about the TV stuff. And so I said, well, that's what my book is there for. Leonard Maltin does the Disney films, and he does like page after page, Snow White, Fantasia, Victory Through Air Power, Tonka, Big Red, whatever, all these movies, Happiest Millionaire, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, if you get the first edition, it just kind of abruptly stops again with the rest of the story. Or if you get the second, third, fourth, fifth edition around me, you put up, he'll get this like one paragraph synopsis of all these films that came out in the 70s and 80s. And it's like, that's what I grew up with. And, no fault of Leonard Maltin. He caters to what he grew up with. He grew up with.
I gotta be honest, I agree with Leonard Maltin in this case.
Yeah, but I mean, he grew up with the stuff in the 40s, 50s, or actually the 50s and 60s. My growing up is the 70s and 80s. So it's like, and then there's people younger than me, like if Andrew Farago, he did this book about cartoon stars of the 80s. I don't think I could have done that because, my sweet point of cartoons really is 60s and 70s.
Right.
Now, I don't mean that they're originally released then.
No.
So you can cover theatrical cartoons. So anything up to the 70s. But when you get into the 80s, it's like, yeah, there's some good stuff, but I don't feel qualified enough to write about like Deke's output or even Marvel Productions output or Nelvana's output. I could do it, but it doesn't resonate.
We're going to talk about one of those questions.
It doesn't resonate with me. And so I think that's what it is. It's like that, the stuff I like, the 60s and 70s stuff, doesn't resonate with Jerry Beck very well, or especially with Leonard Maltin very well. It's like that's hack stuff that was done after my interest went away.
Because I know that Leonard never cared for Hanna-Barbera, but Jerry loves it.
Yeah. And it's just age group. It's like, so Leonard Maltin grew up before it existed. Jerry Beck grew up with it. I grew up where all the early classic stuff was already in reruns.
And I grew up with the internet.
Yeah, and you grew up where it's all been put out on video, and you can see anything from any time, or whatever.
I can see, I don't know, Paramount's some random modern madcap for free on the internet anytime I want.
Yeah, I mean, when I got Of Mice and Magic in 1980, I was amazed at how many cartoons existed that I didn't know, I'd never seen.
Right.
I didn't know where, I didn't even know all the studios made cartoons.
Right.
I thought about it. It's like, okay, I knew Disney, obviously, knew the Looney Tunes.
Of the Van Buren studio.
I knew nothing of Van Buren. I never heard of them.
Yeah.
Terry Tunes, I guess I knew Mighty Mouse and stuff like that. And then I go, wow, they did this other stuff late in the 60s that was like Sick Sydney and Gaston Lecrayon and stuff. Oh, I didn't know that. And then I guess I knew the Paramount stuff, somewhat, because I knew the Popeye cartoons and, Casper and stuff like that. But I didn't think about each studio having its own thing. I saw Tom and Jerry, didn't think about being MGM, but even though you have the Roaring Lion at the beginning of every cartoon, didn't register. It just was like cartoons were around. Woody Woodpecker didn't think about being Universal. It's like, oh, I get it. So this studio had this, and so he made it all make sense. But I never remember Van Buren at all.
I'm sure you had no idea who, what Tommy Stathis was his incredible sets with, Bobby Bumps or Brave Studios or
the silent stuff. About the only silent cartoons I knew of was Out of the Inkwell and Felix the Cat. And that was about it.
Half the reason also was Cabarga's Fleischer storybook had come out before then, right?
Right. So I knew about that. But I saw him even on TV, not the 60s. Well, I saw the 60s version too, but I knew about the silent version and Felix the Cat, because silent cartoons didn't show often on TV.
Right.
Then, I knew of Oswald the Rabbit, but I never saw them until they were on DVD.
Yeah. Now those are impossible to even find online, because those are stuff I actually deal with a similar thing with you. If I just say I wanted to, search up a Bobby Bump short, I'd have to wait for Tommy to release it on Blu-ray, because they're nowhere online either, because only 3 guys own them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Now I'm going to ask you 2 books, because I remember you said that your least popular books were your Beatles book and also your Monkeys book.
Well, Monkeys is the most popular.
Well, Monkeys is the most popular book?
The 2 Monkeys books and their first Total Television book are probably most successful books.
I would have thought it'd be one of the Harvey books.
Those are probably the next tier.
Yeah. Yeah, but you said, sorry, I mean, not. You said your least popular were your Disney book and your Beatles book.
Yeah.
Which I have to ask you a question.
Surprised me too.
Which I have to ask you a question. Mm-hmm. The one subject in pop culture that's been written so many times is probably the Beatles.
Yeah.
Why would you write a Beatles book? I'm not trying to be rude here, but I'm asking.
No, I mean that one, I get entrepreneurial at times, and I say, well, there's a lot of Beatles books, and it always seems like they make money, no matter what stupid subjects it's on. And I didn't think I had anything I could bring to the table. I certainly was not going to write a straight Beatles history.
Right.
But then I said, I can have opinions about things, and I realized that sometimes my opinions differ from other people's opinions about certain songs of theirs. And I said, it'd be fun just to do a book about my opinions about it. And there's an old album called Chet Atkins Picks on the Beatles, which is instrumental versions of Beatles songs picked on a guitar. But I use the other meaning of pick, like I'm picking on you, so I thought that was just a funny title. I rarely toot my own horn. I've talked to other people. It's like, I should probably put my name in things. Like I have Fun Ideas Productions. It's not Mark Arnold Productions. I don't have, so Mark Arnold Picks on the Beatles. I think part of the reason it's not very successful is I put my name above the Beatles name, and who the whatever is Mark Arnold, and so.
Now, how did your Monkeys book come out? Because that was written. Was that your first book written with somebody?
I think so. Yeah.
Is it your only book written with somebody? That's what I.
Well, the new Total Television ones with Victoria Biggers, and I did those 2 the Jack Davis and the John Severin books with
Yeah,
Mort
yeah, yeah.
Todd.
Yeah, those two
But
books.
those came
and
out later.
those 3 books you did talk about extensively on other podcasts. So
Yeah.
I didn't want to talk about your monkeys book though, because
Yeah. How that came about, I had another friend who wanted to do the same thing because both of them had, both friends, the one, Michael Ventrella is the one I ended up writing the book with.
yes,
Both of them saw my Beatles book and they thought it was great that I was sitting there and daring to say that I didn't like, well, I mean, I can't even think of one off the top of my head. Well, I'm not a big fan of, say, All Things Must Pass. It's
my
by
favorite
George.
is Help.
Okay.
And I literally, I tell you, this is true. Somebody said, write a song that defines your life.
Oh,
And every
okay.
time I say help, as I show the song Help.
So, I had various opinions about certain Beatles songs, and I'm the type, it's like I'm all critiquing things and saying this is bad and this is, and some people get all butthurt about it. But the honest thing is I could probably listen to any Beatles song over and over, even Revolution Number 9. So it really doesn't matter to me. But I was just kind of thinking that my go-to albums of what, when I decided to do all the solo stuff and the unreleased stuff and everything, it just made it like an interesting book to do. Now, whether somebody else is interested in my opinions, I guess they aren't. And so, I mean, I can't say it never sold. It just never sold the level as I expected it to sell. That's all.
Right.
Considering the topic.
Yeah.
The Disney one is, again, the same way. I thought Disney books sold no matter what you said. And I thought I had a different angle because I covered the period after Disney died, before Michael Eisner took over, which nobody ever talks about. And some people actually thought that was great. Other people thought it was horrible because, it's the worst period of Disney. It's like, whatever. It's like, I still defend it because that's what I grew up with. Again.
Now, I'm going to ask you one thing, though. I actually think that it's still a topic to be covered, but I still think it's the worst part of Disney until right now. I think that right now we're in a slump too.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to ask you, your Pac-Man book. Why would you do this to yourself?
That's another work for hire thing. Okay. So there are occasional things I've done in my life that I didn't request to do.
I was guessing you didn't request to do that one.
John Sutherland was one. You mentioned that. Let's see. Various articles. I did an article once for Back Issue. I've done a lot of articles. I did one on Korg, 70,000 BC, which is a Hanna-Barbera.
Chords. I think you said
Korg. Korg.
No.
K-O-R-G.
It's chords.
Yeah, it's a live action Hanna-Barbera show that was filmed in 1974.
Oh God!
On Saturday morning. It's pretty lame.
I can tell.
I wrote an article about it. It's on DVD from Warner Archives. I've never actually bought it because at the time I did the article, it hadn't been released yet on DVD. Yeah. But it would have been helpful if it was at the time. But anyway, I wrote an article about the comic book mainly. Yes, there was a comic book by Charlton. So, but I mean, that's the type of thing. So occasionally I get a kind of a work for hire thing, as it were. So I'm doing articles. So how the Pac-Man,
those aren't as fun though, are they?
The Pac-Man one turned out to be more fun than I thought. But I usually try to make them fun if I don't want to do it. Sutherland turned out to be more fun because it's more interesting than I thought it would be. But in the case of Pac-Man, I watched the show when it first came on. I played the video game. I'm not a big video game guy. And it was the publisher, Bear Manor again. He says, I need a Pac-Man book. And of all people is Scott Shaw, who said, I know the perfect person to write that book. Now, I don't know if he was trying to give me a line or a death sentence or something. I don't know. But I said, I don't know if I can do it. I'm not your man, but it's like, but if you can't find anybody else, maybe I'll take a stab at it. And that was really what I said. And so he kept, a few months went by, and the guy who does Bear Manor, his name's Ben Omar, and Ben said, Mark, my kid really loves the Pac-Man cartoon show. Please, can you do a God, it's like if I was going to do a book about the worst Hanna-Barbera show ever, Um, now I don't know if it really is the worst. Actually, I
Well,
watched.
you haven't written about Wheelie and the Chopper Bunch yet, Mark.
Yeah, but I actually watched that as a kid, so I could probably have had more fun writing it. But no, so I got the DVDs from Warner Archives. I said, okay, at least let me watch the episodes. I've liked Marty Ingalls from other things, like I'm Dick and Sea's Fenster,
Yeah,
and I
the Dick Van
said,
Dyke Show.
okay, maybe I can make this fun. And we talked a little bit earlier about doing a Hanna-Barbera book. I said, hey, I could squeeze in a Hanna-Barbera history in this book and disguise it as a Pac-Man book, because I can't talk, and I can't talk for 300 pages about Pac-Man alone. So I told Ben I was going to do it this way. I said, I'm going to put a history of Hanna-Barbera in it. And so, like, the first third of it is the history. It's very condensed. It really just basically says titles and a few events, but it's very thorough, because I realized nobody's really done a Hanna-Barbera history. It was my way of doing a Hanna-Barbera book without doing a Hanna-Barbera book.
Now,
then I did the history of Pac-Man, the game, and then I did a history of video games in general, and then I did a history of the TV show. And doing all that research, I made it more fun, because I didn't know all the history of video games. I didn't know, because I grew up with it all starting. I started off with Pong and all that stuff. And, the different games came out, Space Invaders and whatever, and I just played them, not knowing what I was playing. And Chuck E. Cheese.
So you were a gamer growing up?
What?
You were a gamer growing up?
Yeah, but I mean, not an avid one. I mean, it's not like the way you can do it now, where you just sit down at your computer and do it. You had to go to an arcade, and it was like at the pizza parlor or whatever, and you put in a quarter and play a game. The video arcades didn't even really exist until like the late 70s and maybe early 80s, and then movies like Tron came out and stuff like that. So I was there when all that stuff started. I went to Chuck E. Cheese when it first opened, and it was very video game centric, and they had the animatronic mouse and all the other characters and everything back then, because the Atari guy created this. Atari created that stuff, and I don't know, but so I have an active interest. But as time went on video games, the reason why I got out of them is because I kind of like the simple graphics of the earliest ones, and then when they got to be all just shoot 'em ups, where you're doing the perspective of a guy going down, hunting down, like Castle Wolfenstein, and later Worlds of Warcraft, and even Grand Theft Auto and all that, I lost interest. It's like the more realistic it became, the less interested I got. So anyway.
With me growing up, it was never like, I was never like, bullied or anything. Usually never at all. But if I was bullied at all, it was not because I was interested in comics or animation, or that I was a nerd like that. Nobody could care less. It's that I wasn't a sports fan.
Yeah.
It's that I wasn't a gamer.
Yeah.
That's what was the big taboo about my life. That I didn't watch sports.
Yeah. I was never a sports fan either, but I did have certain eras. I always say this, and I've even said this recently. I've never been a rooter of a team.
Yeah.
Like there's people that
I love
I love the Yankees. We'll just say the Yankees. I love the Yankees, even when they lose. I love the Yankees. To me, it's like, well, the players switch all the time, so how can you love the team? I mean, one year you have all the players you like, then they trade them all off, or they all leave, whatever, and then you still like the team. Well, that's the way you are. You're supposed to be a fan through and through. But I'm not a fan of the name. I'm a fan of the players. So, like in the early 70s, here's my fandom of sports. I loved the early 70s Oakland A's, because they had this solid team that kept going to the World Series a few years in a row. And then free agency came in the mid 70s. And so everybody got to be on any team. They all left, and the team went down the toilet. And I said, wow, that sucks. And then so I lost interest in baseball. Then football during the 80s, 49ers were big at Joe Montana. I loved them. They went to the Super Bowl a few times. Blah, 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 blah. And then slowly after time, everybody retired or traded off, or da da da. And then a few years later, I got interested in basketball because there was a team, Sacramento Kings, and I liked them because they had some cool players. And then slowly over time, they traded them off, and then the team sucked, and that was the end of that. And so I like base groups of sports figures for a certain amount of time. Like I wasn't even around in the early 60s, but I would have been a San Francisco Giants fan because you had like Willie Mays and stuff like that on the team at the time. And it was a solid team, even though they didn't really go to the World Series. But, sports for me, it's like I can enjoy it if I watch it. I never actively seek it out. Usually the Super Bowl is an excuse for me to go out and eat because restaurants are empty unless you go to sports bars and and it's like, so yeah, I've never been a sports guy. Video games, neither. It's like I'd rather write books.
Growing up, of course, I grew up in an era on social media. So that was the other taboo, that I was never heavily on social media.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I don't have an Instagram account. So
I have one, but I never use it. So
yeah.
I always test these things out. I'm always kind of this. I'm a Facebook guy just because I liked MySpace better, but and it's fun to just get. I had a website, but it's fun to just have like the instant response. You post something. Hey, here's my new book. Oh wow, it looks good. I want to buy it. It's fun to see that. But that's the only reason. But I rarely go on the internet and say, "Oh, I'm having a bad day," or "I had a tuna sandwich for lunch."
That's
It's
me
like
too. It's me too. I don't even have very many pictures of me on Facebook. I just have, my profile picture is right now is like, my cover photo is a picture from Popeye from
right.
some short, and I'm like, I don't even need a picture of me on Facebook. Why?
Yeah.
I don't care about my life. I'm just talking about somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now the last two books, and then I'm going to get you to the point, or we might even have to do this a different time where we talk about people you've met.
Okay. Okay.
Now,
Last two books.
Alvin Show.
Yeah.
And the Alvin Show and the Dennis the Menace book. Those are the two books.
Okay. Which one? Just how they came about?
Yeah.
Alvin Show came about. This is a Scott Shaw story again, which is kind of funny. When Total Television book came out, Scott Shaw, I saw him at San Diego. I assume you know who Scott Shaw is when I keep mentioning him.
Yeah. I talked to Scott for my Hanna-Barbera essay.
Oh, okay. All right. I just mentioned him. It's like I assume you know who he is. For anybody out there, he did Captain Carrot for DC. He's drawn.
He's been on your podcast,
Flintstones, everything. So he's worked on.
He's been on my podcast, I guess.
Oh, okay. All right, very good. So after I did my Total Television book, he says, Mark, you should do a book about Format Films, the company that did the Alvin Show. And I go, well, that'd be a very short book. And I gave him a very flippant answer. It's like one day there was Format Films. They made the Alvin Show, and then they made the Lone Ranger, and then they closed. The end. And so I said, I'm probably not going to be doing a book about Format Films. And so he didn't even remember that I said that, or but it is something I said. And then years later, when I was thinking about different things to do, and like I said, I try to do studios nobody else covers. I said, format. They've actually done a little bit more than I thought they would. Now the book may not be as thick as some of those books like the Patty Freeling, but
I think it's good though.
I can get about 300 pages on this, and there's certainly a lot of pictures I can show. So, and I really just wanted to do about the chipmunks, but I was worried about the Bagdasarians. So far they have left me alone. I wanted to interview them, but they didn't respond. I tried every which way to get. I talked to their secretary. I wrote them a letter.
Did they ever tell you if they liked your book?
I have never heard that they like it or disliked it, but they also haven't given me a lawsuit, so I'm very grateful. They have left me alone. So anyway, but I decided to play it safe. I'm not just going to talk about him or the Alvin Show. I'm also going to talk about Format Films and their history, and Liberty Records and their history. And it actually turned out to be a better book for that I didn't just focus solely on the chipmunks.
Yeah, right.
Because I really didn't want to cover the later chipmunk stuff. I mean, I do, and like very quickly at the end, but just to kind of say what happened. But I just wanted to focus on because most people really care about the original years. Certainly Scott Shaw does.
Yeah.
And when he and I appeared on Stu Showstack, both of them were appreciative that I didn't cover the later stuff in great depth. And it's like, yeah.
I am too.
Yeah. I try not to. You mentioned the Underdog movie. Well, I had to mention it because there was a big gap of nothing. It's like, and that was the last kind of gasp of anything to do with.
I think a lot of people are going to be the same thing. The people that hated that movie are going to think, what did they think of it?
Yeah. So I didn't give thumbs down on any of the later Chipmunks projects. I just mentioned them really quickly
Right.
because I didn't really
I
want
said
to
the
talk
only
about
thing that's good is that that first Chipmunk movie, because
Yeah.
if you ignore the actual movie and just pay attention to the innuendos of the Richard Alvin show,
Yeah.
it's watchable.
Yeah.
But you just got to ignore the movie.
Yeah. So I tend to agree, but again, I didn't review it. I just mentioned it.
A lot of people hate it. I know Stuart hates it. Stu hates it.
Of course.
Stu hates a lot of things.
Yes. Now the Dennis the Menace book, that was kind of like a personal. That was like a personal thing, like the Disney one. Just a personal project I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Originally, in all the years of collecting Harvey comics, you go to different shows and there wouldn't be any, but somehow I'd find like Dennis the Menace books for like nothing, a big box of Dennis the Menace books for a quarter,
Yeah.
even cheaper. So I just buy them over time, and then
even the ones that are Christian themes, because I anything that had a religious theme, I was out. No Archie with religious themes, I was just like,
Well, I bought those.
School.
Yeah, I bought those because I saw them at a religious bookstore once, and I said, "That's cool."
I was like, I go to a religious public school. I went to a religious high school. I am done with Jesus. Not the comic.
I didn't have a problem with it, because it still was Archie, it's still Dennis the Menace, but I didn't realize those were so hard to find. That's what the weird part was. But I just collected them, and I got to the point where I had almost every issue. I was missing very few. And by this point, eBay came along, and so I said, I'll just snag the rest of them up. And so I got a complete set. And my friend Greg Beta was friends with Frank Hill, who drew for Dennis the Menace, and he drew a bunch of other comic strips and things like that, and Lee Hawley, and they both lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so I met with both of them, and I said, hey, if I do a book on Dennis Menace, will you be interviewed? Because by this point, Ketchum was dead. Hank Ketchum was dead. And I didn't know anybody else that worked on it, and I was just going to talk about the comic books. And then it branched out. I started talking about the comic strip. And then I interviewed Ron Ferdinand, who does the comic strip currently, and Marcus Hamilton, who does the comic panel currently. And then Stu Shostak said, oh, you got to talk about the TV show with Jay North. And so I didn't want to interview Jay North, and Stu gave me permission to just take quotes from his interviews, which I was perfectly fine with because he asked some actually decent questions, and I took actual quotes. So,
did you care for the Dennis the Menace TV shows? I actually agree with Matt Groening. Have you heard Matt Groening's quote about the Dennis the Menace show?
No, what is it?
I agree with him because he says that he made The Simpsons because he wanted Bart to be something that Dennis on the TV show was not. Because I like the comic strip and I like the comic books too. I have some of the comic books too. But the TV show, I gotta be honest, I'm actually not a fan of it because I'm actually I liked Leave It to Beaver a while ago, but I liked Eddie Haskell and Leave It to Beaver. That's the whole reason that makes that show stand out. Beaver, I don't even care about. It's the kid.
Yeah.
But the show, I agree with Matt Groening said you have this like really great opening sequence, and then you have this mamby-bamby little kid who's just whining all the time, and he's got this slingshot that he never uses.
Yeah. Well, I like Dennis the Menace, the comic books. The comic panel in the newspaper, I didn't really get when I was a kid because it's only one frame, and it's kind of when I was really little. But they would put like an animated Dennis on various shows, like Curiosity Shop. They did the Chuck Jones show, which is long gone and stuff like that. But so I always
sent me some copies of them.
And Dairy Queen is still around, but they don't have Dennis the Menace stuff. But they always had Dennis the Menace stuff when I was a kid. So. And in Monterey, which is close to the San Francisco Bay Area, there's a playground there, Dennis the Menace playground. So, the character is around. And I saw the Jay North show, and my opinion of the show was just disappointment.
Yeah.
Because, again, you're doing a live action version of something I thought should be a cartoon. And then, of course, if you watch the show, the cartoon version is just a tornado at the beginning of the show. It's like, at least they could have animated him on the opening credits. It's like, how cheap can you get? Um,
Yeah,
I
that's
watched
what,
it, and then I kind of, when I was later, I kind of missed it because, it's like, what, I remember watching it as a kid and it kind of went away. It was never in syndication after a while. And
Mhm.
then they put them on DVD and I got them and I go, oh, wait, that's Smith. I'm watching it. And I go, wow, this show is really obnoxiously shrill.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Because I thought the same thing
It's
about
like,
Leave It to Beaver.
he's
I
like,
thought the same-
Mr. Wilson, like too often during the show. And you're like,
I thought the same
it's
thing
like,
about Leave It to Beaver.
yeah.
Because I'm like,
I've never been a Beaver fan either. See, it's like, the
I like
thing
Leave It to
about
Beaver.
these shows.
I remember I watched the first season back to back, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I like this Kitty Eddie Haskell. Then I'm watching it again. I'm like, I still like Eddie Haskell. I still think he's a brat, but I think he's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
The rest of it is it's just dreck. It's just
Yeah.
it feels like a commercial for conservative America.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if that's the issue. I just didn't think it was as funny as like, see, it depends on when you grew up. Again, this is like what we're talking about on on not comic books, on animated cartoons.
Right.
You got Leonard Maltin, you got Jerry Beck, and then me, and then Andrew Farago. It's just different, eras. Yeah. And so because of that, we have our preferences of what we like better.
Right.
Probably all of them are okay, but it's what you grew up with is what you like. So on TV shows, things like Leave It to Beaver and Dennis the Menace were kind of more like Stu Showstack. He loves those shows. Whereas me, they left me kind of cold. But then I know that the show that had kids that I liked was the Brady Bunch. And Stu's like, and I get it.
Agree with Stewart.
What?
I agree with Stewart.
Yeah. I mean, so I get it, and there's probably somebody younger than me that loves Full House, let's say, for shows with kids on it, and I couldn't care less about that show. So it's whatever you grew up with. There are some that cross the line. Like I think all generations can like, say, the Dick Van Dyke Show or I Love Lucy, but it's really what?
The Andy Griffith Show.
Yeah. But it's really hard.
The black and white ones.
It's really hard for like a show like Leave It to Beaver necessarily to cross all generational barriers because there's something about it that's so set in where it was.
Right.
Whereas Andy Griffith, that's a good example. It's like, yes, it was in the 60s, but it seems so timeless. It could be almost any time.
Yeah. I think that it depends though. I think that the only reason why the Andy Griffith Show is like that is because of Don Knotts, I think. Because I think those color ones are just there. There's nothing appealing about them.
The funny thing about it is I never saw the Don Knotts ones for years. I always saw the color ones because when I was a kid, the year I was born, color TV was the norm for prime time.
Right.
And so immediately they started whisking away black and white stuff. So
except for Lucy, right?
What?
Didn't they still show Lucy by that time?
They would show I Love Lucy, but I'm talking about news shows. But if they showed reruns, if they showed Gilligan's Island, they never showed the first season. If they showed Lost in Space, they never showed the first season. I Dream of Jeannie, they never showed the first season. So Andy Griffith Show, they never showed the first 5 seasons. And I would read in some of these TV books, they'd say, oh, well, Don Knotts, he was the funniest thing on there, blah, blah, blah. And I only remembered him being on there a couple times in the color episode, so I don't know what the hubbub was about.
That's just confusing. Because
and it's like, how can he be the big star? And it's like, then I finally, when home video came out, they started showing these older black and white things, and I go, oh, because my favorite episode of the Andy Griffith Show is the one where Barney Fife is in the choir and he thinks he can sing and he can't, and he sings out of tune, and that's hysterical. But I never saw that as a kid. I never saw Gomer Pyle on Andy Griffith's Show. I didn't even know it was a spinoff. It's like, because like I said, they didn't show this black and white stuff. The only thing they did show in black and white.
Opie shows up.
What?
Doesn't it get confusing when Opie shows up then?
What do you mean? The color ones?
Yeah, the color ones. Because doesn't Opie show up in the color one?
Opie's in the color ones, yeah.
Yeah, no,
but I even saw maybe RFD in new episodes, and I was saying, what happened to Andy Griffith? Where did he go?
Yeah. But you said you grew up with. You said Gomer. You saw Gomer Pyle the spinoff, but you didn't know it was a spinoff. I'm like, well, doesn't it get confusing when Opie shows up?
Oh, I just thought he was some kid. I didn't connect the dots. I was pretty young, but it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, even Aunt Beast shows up on an episode of,
Yeah.
but I didn't know it was a spinoff even then because, you've seen that before where, you have some random character that has nothing to
Yeah.
do with the other one show up in something and you go, hey, that's pretty cool,
Yeah.
So I never knew for years that was connected, and then I go, oh, because I always thought the first time they connected TV shows was like with All in the Family and Mary Tyler Moore show where they had all the spinoffs from there. I never
Yeah.
thought about, well, even Andy Griffith shows a spinoff of the Danny Thomas show. I didn't know that either.
I actually didn't know that either until much later too.
So there you go.
Now, we probably should stop now and then come back. Can we do this again and then talk about the people you've met? Because
Sure.
I got to get back to my dorm.
Yeah, that's fine. And this is enough for a show now, but
Okay.
I'll let you wrap it up and we'll join again another time.
This has been the podcast I've hijacked.
Give it back.
It's back now. And thank you for joining us.
All right. Thank you.